Richard's on from Malaysia. You're on with Jenna and Matt.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Jenna. How are you guys? Thanks for taking my call.
We're doing well. What do you got for us?
Okay, first I'd like to just state two principles, then I'll go on to my question. My first principle is that the person who asserts that God exists and tells someone else, asserts that to another person, has the burden of proof to prove to the person objectively that God exists.
We agree.
So, right. Second is that I don't know is a very valid and rational answer to a question.
You are on an amazing trajectory. You could be hosting this show in a very short period of time.
So far.
Well, thank you for telling me that. Okay, now, so this is my belief, because I've had personal experiences which I feel are directly with God, but they are internal, they're intuitional, and I cannot demonstrate that to others. Yep. So I was thinking about how to deal with this. But it occurred to me that it could well be that all of us have, instead of 5 physical senses, we have 6 physical senses. And the 6th sense is this thing that, for the time being, let's just call it intuition for simplicity. And it's just very underdeveloped in most people. But some people have it in an extreme level. People like, automatic writers, Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversations with God.
Can I pause for?
So do you think? What do you think?
I want to pause for a couple seconds here, because first of all, there's no sense in us numbering this and saying it's a 6th sense, because the traditional notion that we have 5 senses is already flawed. Because even if you go beyond sight, hearing, taste, touch, etc., you also have a sense of direction. You have a sense of bodily awareness. There's tons of physical senses that we actually have. So we shouldn't bother trying to.
All right.
But what you're talking about, this notion of intuition, is actually something that's been suggested by theologians, and it's referred to as the sensus divinitatis, or divinatus. I'll probably get it wrong because I don't speak Latin, and neither does it really anybody else. It's a dead language. But the notion that we have some sort of divine sense is this notion that people have used to prop up contemplatives. Now, first of all, automatic writing isn't really a thing. That is pseudoscientific woo that has never demonstrated any sort of effectiveness. The same thing with remote viewing and all this other stuff. But what it seems that you're getting to is you have some sort of internal feeling that you interpret as being at least support for the notion that there's a God, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you have that sort of internal feeling about things that you've turned out to be wrong about?
Try not to be. Well, that's the thing, you see. When you have a perception and experience, then you think about it, and then you make a rational decision whether it makes sense or not. Because when you're having that experience, you don't really analyze it sometimes, especially if it comes upon you suddenly.
Right.
So I've thought about this for a long time, and this is what I've got, because I can't refute what I had, the experience I had. And it coincides with a genre of experiences many people have had over the ages or claim to have had. So,
but we know that people.
It's no proof.
We know that people. We know that people experience things that turn out to be incorrect, or their interpretation of their experience turns out to be incorrect. We know that happens.
Right.
So it seems to me that if you have an experience, that you should answer "I don't know," which you're fine with, until such time as you do know, until such time as there's evidential support that a particular interpretation or understanding of that experience is most likely the right one.
Well, that's the thing, you see. If everybody is only able to have an internal experience of a thing and they can't demonstrate it to others, but if many people have had that sort of an experience over time, then rationally, rationally you have to ask yourself if that is a valid experience you are having, even though you can't really repeat it, you can't demonstrate it to others.
Yes,
because instincts is something that even scientists have instincts when they go down a certain path.
Yes, you should ask yourself that, but what answer should you reach?
Well, the answer could be, that's the thing, you can't prove it one way or the other objectively.
And so therefore, if this does not prove something one way or the other, then you should not reach a conclusion that it's true.
Can I use an example that I learned that might help kind of put this in a little bit more of a metaphorical picture for you? If you and I are in a jungle and there's a big bush and there could be a lion behind it, something moves and it could be something dangerous that's going to come and eat us, okay? And we both have this instinctive feeling that something is going to come out and attack us and we're going to die, okay?
Okay.
You have the feeling it's there, and I have the feeling it's there, but I say, you know what? I'm not going to go with that. I don't think it's there. You say you do, so you run.
Right.
Is there a possibility that that we could be wrong?
Yes, there is a possibility.
Okay.
But that possibility doesn't mean that we are wrong.
Correct.
I'm not saying that you are. All I'm saying is that I have the feeling that there may be something there, but I don't think that there's enough evidence for me to go with that. There's a possibility that I could go to hell because I'm not convinced. But up until this point, I've never seen any evidence of that lion.
So in Jenna's example, if there is a lion in the bushes and Jenna gets eaten and you don't, then you're liable to think that you had this intuition that a lion was there. But the truth is, you might have just been lucky. Mm-hmm. It might, because your intuition may have had nothing to do with whether or not there was a lion there. It's not like you were necessarily sensing a lion. Mm-hmm. You may have just had an inductive inference or gotten lucky. So even if Jenna gets eaten, we don't know anything at all.
If I was
Hang on.
sensing the lion, that's my problem. The thing is,
how would you show, if you can't show, Richard,
only to one person.
Richard, if you can't show, that's the point, then you don't know.
But could it be objective only to yourself? Because
no, there's no such thing as objective only to yourself. That is by definition subjective.
Okay. Let me think about that.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Hey, that was really I really like that response.
The thing is,
go ahead, sir.
The only issue here is that if you both sensed it and Jenna decides to go in and explore the bush and does not encounter a lion, that also doesn't prove that your sense was wrong or that her sense was wrong. Because maybe the lion went off and moved away. Maybe the lion has a sense of when it's being sensed and it moved off. You can do this forever. Or maybe it just luckily walked off. So when you start talking about, I have a sneaking suspicion that, or I have an intuition that, if there's no way to test it, then yeah, you can still go with it. You can say, you know, I have a friend, by the way, who won't go ice skating because he's absolutely terrified, or was, that he would fall and someone would skate over his fingers and slice his fingers off. And I even pulled up the ice skates to show them that these are not, generally speaking, some of them are sharper than others, but generally speaking, they're not sharp razor blades. And that the likelihood of something like that happening is so outlandish and preposterous. I mean, I'm sure somebody's going to find somebody who, like, a skate came down and chopped off somebody's, and that's possible. But if your fear is not proportional to the evidence and the likelihood for it, then you have what we would call an irrational fear. And so if there's no way to test whether or not your conclusions that you're making are reasonably based on the evidence supporting them, then the method is flawed. And this is why we don't merely rely on intuition. Do scientists have intuitions? Yeah. We live our lives every day by inference and induction because today is pretty much the same as yesterday. And when somebody like a scientist observes a phenomenon and then they have an intuition, maybe it's this kind of thing. What they're doing is essentially arguing from analogy, that they've seen something else before and maybe it's like this. And they could be right. But until you can test it and show, you don't know.
Okay. Well, can I ask you something? Because I know that you used to be, a card-carrying Christian. You're almost, you're going to enter the seminary and be a preacher and all of that. Mm-hmm. And you turned away at some point when you questioned the logical foundations of your faith.
Yeah.
Do you think you would have turned away from God, in quotes, God, if you were born or you were acquainted with a religion that was not so obviously logically flawed as Christianity?
I have no idea. I I haven't.
No idea.
I'm not aware of any religions that
are less flawed.
Well, there are certainly some that are more. And what religions have done, the religions that succeed, are really good at creating these sorts of defense mechanisms, so that by making it seem real, but making it just untestable enough that you can never know, then it keeps people running around going, well, it could be, well, it could be. Well, how do you know it's not? You can't prove it's wrong. You can't prove it's wrong. And so it keeps people believing something. And what I came to realize was that I can't believe something just because I am incapable of showing that it's not true. What I need is evidence for it. And so that would apply to every religion, at least that I'm familiar with. If there's some religion out there that actually has evidence for it. But I can't tell you what would happen had I been born and raised differently, because then I'd be living a different life. I don't know if I would have come to an understanding of skepticism at all.
Sounds like you've got a good head on your shoulders.
Intelligent. Sorry?
Sounds like you've got a good head on your shoulders. Like you're doing you're asking yourself some honest questions.
Right. So why do people think you're mean? You're making a lot of sense.
I'll tell you why.
Because not everyone's
as honest. I'm not convinced out of my personal positions. I'm just thinking about what you're saying, and I have to think about it more. But
I'll tell you why people think I'm mean, and I'll be brutally honest. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm not. And no. I have been wrong. I have been arrogant, condescending, dismissive. I have been rude. But when we're talking about something that goes to somebody's core, when this belief is foundational to who they are, even addressing the belief itself without addressing the person feels like a personal attack to them. And if they're not in a position where they understand logical fallacies, when they're not in a position where they appreciate the need for evidence, they get pushed into a corner where the only thing they can do is lash out, and some of them will say that I'm mean when I'm not.
I see. Well, I think you're doing a great service for mankind.
Thank you.
Because
we try.
Because you're being very rational about it, and since you're so rational, anything that's irrational can't stand in the face of pure reason, calm, collected rationality. So all the bullshit religions which don't make sense would not have existed if everyone took that stance, because in the first place, if they claim that there is a God, if I claim there's a God, how can God be irrational? In fact, my first experience with God convinced me so clearly that God is rational, completely sensible. I don't know. I just can't explain it that way. And I started moving away from formal religion. Out of that experience with God, can you believe that? I mean, it sounds so contradictory to call into the show and say that. But,
I don't know what you believe.
Let me say something that'll blow your mind. Because all these people who are like, oh, you can't prove there's not an intuition where somebody could intuit that a God exists, until you define God. Because under the God of classical theism, the God that exists in most religions, where there's a God who actually wants you to know that he exists, no such God that was wise and intelligent and understood evidence and epistemology and reason would ever implant a subjective sense into individuals to tune to him, because he would understand that this would always be a flawed detection mechanism. And so the only God that makes sense in that sense, if there is a God that wants people to know that he exists, is one that willingly, eagerly, actively presents himself to everyone in a way that is not prone to simple subjective assessments, but can in fact be measured, tested, etc.
It's so beautifully stated. So beautifully stated, Matt.
Thank you.
I agree.
I've done this once or twice. But I'm going to move on to some other callers, Richard. We appreciate your time.
Okay,
thanks for calling.
All right, thanks. Have a good one. Thanks, guys. Bye.
He sounds so nice.
Yeah. Oh, it's actually one of the things, in part, I've done the show and everything else, but I'm reluctant to even say the book I'm working on since it's so on hold. But it's one of the primary purposes to show that the world that we experience is in conflict with almost every God notion that's ever been presented. And it's why I got into an argument with a caller recently, because my question was, if a Damascus Road experience is good enough for Saul, then it should be good enough for all of us. Otherwise, God is playing favorites. And God is then relying on us to depend on Saul's experience as if that would be the same as if it were our experience. And so that notion is in conflict with a God that would understand the nature of evidence. Mm-hmm. And so really what you've got with these God notions is here's a God who created everything, created us, stuck us in a world, set up the rules of this world, gave us a brain to assess things, and then made everything within reality seemingly subject to this notion of experimentation, of independent confirmation, where that is the best way to understand everything. But the single most important issue of all, his own existence, he made impervious to that process. Right. Now, that makes no sense. This is very much like, you wake up every day and there's a note on the refrigerator that's supposed to be from a parent that you've never met with instructions for what you're supposed to do with your life. And then one day you find out that, it's this social worker who comes over and puts this note on the refrigerator door every day. And you're like, hey, wait a minute, you're not my mom. I got this note from your mom. And then you do more investigating and you find out that in fact, the social worker's never met your mom, just is writing down what she feels your mom would want you to do. Now, there's no way to ever prove that your mom doesn't exist or that your mom's not somehow conveying secret information to the social worker. But there comes a point where you have to make a decision about, am I going to pay any attention to the notes on the door? Because none of this seems to be in my best interest. None of this seems to be coming from someone who loves me. And by the way, if this person loves me, where the hell are they?
Yep.
It's, it's like I have a girlfriend, but she goes to another school, you wouldn't know her type thing. I have a God. He just is impervious to your science.